There's a moment in every Scorpio's life when they stop hoping and start remembering. Not the sweet memories, not the love, but the lies, the betrayal, the exact moment when someone looked them in the eyes and thought they'd never find out. They were wrong, because if you've ever crossed a Scorpio, you already know. They may stay quiet, they may even pretend to move on, but deep in their soul, something changed forever. And when it changes, it doesn't come back. Not in this life, not in the next. Scorpios don't hate easily. They feel too much to waste time on cheap emotions like hate. But when they do hate, it's not surface level. It's not gossip. It's not petty. It's sacred. It's the kind of hate born from spiritual betrayal. The kind that poisons trust and cracks the mirror of intuition. And here's what they'll never tell you. Some zodiac signs don't just hurt Scorpio, they reprogram them, they scar them. They wake up the part of the Scorpio that says, I will never let this happen again. And once that part is awake, it's game over. This isn't just another astrology video, this is a warning. This is an initiation. Because today I'm going to show you the signs that Scorpio will never, and I mean never, forgive. Not because they're evil, but because their energy feels like poison to Scorpio's truth. Their habits triggering. Their behavior unforgivable. Their words tattooed into Scorpio's memory forever. By the end of this, you won't just understand who Scorpio cuts off. You'll understand why, and you'll realize that sometimes never forgiving someone isn't bitterness, it's survival. So if you've ever been cut off by a Scorpio, you might want to stay and listen, because chances are your sign is on this list. Let's begin. Part 1, Gemini, the two-faced trap. It always starts the same way. Scorpio meets Gemini, and for a moment, just a moment, they believe they've found someone exciting, someone refreshing, someone who makes the world feel alive again. Gemini is charming, quick, electric. Their words flow like music, their eyes sparkle with mischief, and their ability to dance through any conversation is magnetic. At first, Scorpio is intrigued. They lean in. They want to understand the mind behind the laughter. They want to go deep. But Gemini never stays in one place long enough to be understood. Here's what no one warns Scorpio about. Gemini doesn't lie the way most people lie. They don't lie to manipulate. They lie to survive, to adapt, to keep things light. But for Scorpio, a sign ruled by truth intensity and emotional X-ray vision, those lies feel like betrayal. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman, let's call her Maya, once fell in love with a Gemini man. He was hilarious, endlessly curious, and seemed to know something about everything. Maya had been through pain before. Scorpio always has. But something about this man felt like a breeze in a locked room. He talked about books, about cities she had never seen, about adventures she only dreamed of. And then, the small lies started. He said he was working late, but he wasn't. He said he'd call back, but he didn't. He said, "You're the only one," but there was always someone else in the background. And when she finally confronted him, he smiled and said, "Why are you so intense? It's not that serious." That was the final nail in the coffin. To Gemini, it wasn't serious. To Scorpio, it was sacred. So why can't Scorpio forgive Gemini? Because Gemini treats words like wind, while Scorpio treats them like spells. Because Gemini says, "I didn't mean to hurt you," and Scorpio knows they didn't mean not to. Because Gemini forgets. But Scorpio remembers. Every word, every pause, every shift in tone, every inconsistency in your story. It's not that Scorpio wants revenge. No, that would be too simple. What they want is for you to understand that when trust is broken, something ancient is unleashed inside of them. Something that cuts ties not just in this life, but in every karmic thread beyond. So if you're a Gemini and you once knew a Scorpio who loved you but now speaks to you like a stranger, or worse, not at all, it's not hate, it's not drama, it's not ego. It's the final boundary. Because once Scorpio senses they've been emotionally played, they shut the door, lock it, and throw away the key forever. And here's the lesson for all of us. Don't play with people who feel everything. Don't treat sacred souls like casual encounters. Don't dance with fire if you can't handle the burn. Because with Scorpio, you don't get a second chance. You get remembered, but not the way you hope. Part 2. Sagittarius, the free spirit that burned the bridge. Scorpio doesn't fall for people easily, but when they do, it's never shallow. It's cosmic, cellular, all-consuming. And when that rare, once-in-a-lifetime love comes in the form of a Sagittarius, it feels like fate, until it doesn't. At first, it's magic. Sagittarius enters Scorpio's life like a wildfire in a frozen forest. They make Scorpio laugh again. They bring sunlight to old scars. They say, let's not take life so seriously. And for a moment, Scorpio lets go. They open up. They dare to feel safe. They believe they can dance with the wild without getting burned. But Sagittarius doesn't stay. They move on. They drift. They say things like, don't get attached. You're too intense. It's just fun. Here's what they'll never understand. For Scorpio, fun without commitment is cruelty. Freedom without emotional safety is chaos. And the worst thing you can do to a Scorpio is make them believe you're staying when you were never planning to. There was once a Scorpio man named Elias. He met a Sagittarius woman in a bookstore in Boston. She was radiant, spontaneous. Her mind was a universe. They talked for hours. She said things like, I don't believe in rules, I just follow my truth. Elias, who had been emotionally armored his whole life, slowly let her in. For the first time, he felt he didn't have to control love to be safe in it. And then one day, just as fast as she came, she disappeared. No explanation, just a text. I'm not ready for this, but you're amazing. Bye for now. That broke something in him. Why can't Scorpio forgive Sagittarius? Because Sagittarius leaves you bleeding and then calls it freedom. Because they tear through your soul like a shooting star, bright, beautiful, unforgettable, but gone before you could even wish. Because they make you feel like you were too much, when in reality they were never ready for depth. To Scorpio, Sagittarius represents something terrifying, the illusion of intimacy. They touch your body, your dreams, your soul, then vanish like it never mattered. Not because they're evil, but because their version of truth isn't built to hold other people's pain. And that's the problem. Scorpio forgives imperfection. They don't forgive emotional cowardice. And that's what Sagittarius awakens. The memory of being abandoned in the middle of emotional truth. So, if you're a Sagittarius and you once told a Scorpio, I'm just not ready, they heard, you were real, but I wasn't ready to be. And Scorpio doesn't forgive that, not because they hate you, but because you showed them that sometimes truth without accountability is just cruelty wearing a free-spirited mask. Life lesson. Don't walk into someone's sacred space if all you plan to do is leave your footprints. Part 3, Libra. The gentle manipulator, Scorpio sees right through. Libra walks into Scorpio's world like a perfume cloud, soft, graceful, elegant. They're polite, they're charming, they know exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to smile just right. To everyone else, Libra is a delight, but to Scorpio, Libra is a riddle, wrapped in velvet. Because beneath the charm, the diplomacy, and the perfect posture, Scorpio senses something else: control, calculation, emotional distance dressed as grace. Let's talk about energy. Libra lives in the head, Scorpio lives in the soul. Libra wants peace. Scorpio wants truth, even if it's bloody, messy, or uncomfortable. So when the two collide, it's beautiful at first, until Scorpio realizes Libra doesn't want honesty, they want harmony, even if it's fake. Here's a real story. A Scorpio named Julian met a Libra named Elise. She was stunning, a ballet dancer who quoted Rumi and always had the perfect thing to say. She knew how to calm him down, how to soothe his darkness. But after a few months, Julian started noticing the cracks. Every time he brought up something serious, she changed the subject. Every time he asked, "How do you really feel?" she replied with, "Let's not ruin the vibe." And when conflict finally came, she didn't fight. She didn't even defend herself. She smiled, said, "I understand," and disappeared. No confrontation, no explanation, just closure through avoidance. So why can't Scorpio forgive Libra? Because Scorpio doesn't trust people who wear masks. And Libra wears 1,000 of them, one for friends, one for lovers, one for the public, and one for themselves, the mask they believe is kindness, but is really fear of feeling too much. To Scorpio, this feels like emotional betrayal. They don't need perfect, they need real. They'd rather you scream than smile while your heart shuts down. The truth, Libra's need to keep the peace often becomes emotional suppression. They silence conflict, they deflect, they avoid emotional messiness like it's a virus. But to Scorpio, emotions are the truth, and truth avoided becomes truth denied. Scorpio won't say anything at first. They'll watch, they'll test, they'll wait. But once they realize Libra is choosing aesthetics over authenticity, they will never trust them again. Because Scorpio doesn't forgive people who pretend to care just to keep things smooth. So if you're a Libra and a Scorpio once drifted away from you without explanation, that was the explanation. They saw the mask, they felt the distance, they realized you were never fully in. And Scorpio doesn't forgive half-hearted hearts. Life lesson. Sometimes being polite is the cruelest thing you can do. Don't choose peace at the cost of someone else's truth. Because Scorpio doesn't want your perfection. They want your presence. And if they sense you're only half there, they'll walk away whole and never look back. Part 4. Leo. When ego tries to dominate intuition. When Leo and Scorpio meet, the world takes a breath. It's light versus shadow. Fire versus water. Crown versus sting. From the outside, they look unstoppable. Leo, radiant, confident, magnetic. Scorpio, intense, mysterious, unforgettable. Together, they're either an empire or a battlefield. There's rarely a middle ground. At first, it's electric. Leo is drawn to Scorpio's emotional depth. Scorpio is mesmerized by Leo's blazing aura. They admire each other, even crave each other. But admiration turns to competition, and that's when everything changes. Because deep down, Leo wants to be worshipped, and Scorpio only kneels to truth. Here's where it breaks. Leo is ruled by the sun. They shine, they speak loudly, they want to be seen. But Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. They don't need to be seen, they need to see everything. And that terrifies Leo. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman named Renee once dated a Leo named Marcus. He was a public speaker, a man of vision and power. She loved his confidence. But what started as admiration slowly became something else. Every time she spoke about her feelings, he interrupted. Every time she cried, he told her, "You're being dramatic." And when she uncovered something dark about his past and confronted him, he roared. Not in shame, but in ego. "How dare you question me? You think you're better than me? You're just too intense." And that's the moment she knew. Leo couldn't handle Scorpio's ability to see behind the mask, because Leo needs to be adored, and Scorpio can't fake admiration. Scorpio wants soul-level connection. Leo wants to be celebrated even when they're wrong. And Scorpio doesn't forgive people who choose ego over accountability. Why can't Scorpio forgive Leo? Because Leo's pride feels like a slap in the face to Scorpio's emotional truth. Because Leo turns conflict into a spotlight performance, while Scorpio sits quietly with the pain and remembers everything. Because Leo will say, "Why can't you just let it go?" And Scorpio will answer, "Because you never even held it to begin with." To Scorpio, Leo represents a dangerous kind of wound, the kind that looks beautiful on the outside but erodes you silently with emotional neglect. Scorpio won't scream, they won't compete. They'll vanish. They'll protect their heart. They'll write your name in their book of lessons, and never reopen that chapter again. Because Scorpio doesn't forgive being dismissed, they don't forget being mocked for feeling deeply, and they will not bow to a throne built on denial. Life lesson: confidence is magnetic, but if it's not matched with emotional maturity, it becomes a weapon. You can be powerful and still be humble. You can shine and still listen. But if your ego silences someone else's soul, they may walk away, and in the silence that follows, you'll realize Scorpio wasn't dramatic. They were just done. Part 5, Aries. The fire that burns without thinking. Some fires warm the soul. Some fires burn down the house. Aries is the latter when it comes to Scorpio. They come in fast, hot, impulsive, undeniably alive. And for a moment, Scorpio is fascinated. Aries doesn't fake anything. They speak from the gut, they act on instinct, and they fight for what they want. To Scorpio, that passion is magnetic, until it turns reckless, until it hurts without warning, until the fire becomes destruction. Let's be clear, Scorpio respects strength. They even admire fire. But what they can't forgive is emotional recklessness disguised as honesty. Aries will say something sharp, cutting raw, brutal, and then forget about it an hour later. But Scorpio will remember forever. Not just what was said, but the tone, the timing, the way it made them feel like they were nothing. Let me give you a story. A Scorpio man named Kalen fell hard for an Aries woman named Sophia. She was bold, wild, the kind of woman who spoke her mind and didn't apologize for it. He loved that at first. But one night during an argument, she yelled, "You're too sensitive. No one would ever put up with this." It wasn't what she said, it was how easily she said it. Like she didn't even pause to ask, will this break something in him? And that's what shattered the bond. Why can't Scorpio forgive Aries? Because Aries wounds in the moment, but Scorpio bleeds forever. Because Aries says, "I didn't mean it," but Scorpio replies, "You meant it enough to say it." Because Aries confuses emotional honesty with emotional immaturity. They say, "At least I'm being real." But Scorpio hears, "At least I'm careless with your heart." Aries burns hot, they burn bright, and they burn fast. But Scorpio is not a match to be lit. They are a temple to be entered with care. And when Aries storms in like a wildfire, Scorpio locks the gates. The tragedy, Aries often regrets it later. But by then, Scorpio has already gone cold, not out of spite, out of survival. Because when Scorpio realizes that someone they trusted could hurt them so easily they don't stay and explain, they disappear. And what's worse than Scorpio's anger is Scorpio's silence. Life lesson: passion without awareness is dangerous. You can speak your truth, but if you speak it like a weapon, don't be surprised when the one you love never returns. With a Scorpio, one thoughtless moment can undo a lifetime of connection. So think before you burn. Part 6. The aftermath. What happens after Scorpio walks away? When Scorpio walks away, they don't slam the door. They don't make a scene. They don't need to. The silence is the ending. Not a pause, not a test. The ending. But here's what people never realize. When Scorpio leaves, they don't just leave the relationship. They leave the version of themselves that loved you. And that version, it doesn't come back. So what happens in the aftermath? The other person might cry, they might beg, they might apologize, swear they'll change. But by then, Scorpio has already done the grieving while they were still with you. They felt the distance before you noticed. They saw the betrayal before you admitted it. They read between your silences. They mourned you while you were still standing beside them. So by the time they say goodbye, it's not anger, it's release. Here's the truth. Scorpio doesn't seek revenge. They seek rebirth. Once the wound is deep enough, they don't want to fix you. They want to rise without you. But it doesn't mean they weren't broken. It doesn't mean they didn't cry at 2 a.m., remembering the version of you they once believed in. It doesn't mean they didn't replay the conversations trying to understand if it was all a lie, or if you were just too careless with something sacred. The aftermath for Scorpio is sacred. It's where they go underground, where they rebuild, where they transform pain into wisdom. But here's the part no one talks about. They never forget you. They just learn to live without the illusion of you. If you ever hurt a Scorpio deeply and they left, you'll feel their absence like a spiritual echo. You'll feel it when you lie awake wondering why no one else sees you like they did. You'll feel it when you hear a song they loved or see their favorite constellation in the sky. You'll wonder if they ever think of you. And the answer is yes, but not the way you hope. They don't think of what could have been. They remember what shouldn't have happened. And that memory keeps the door forever closed. Life lesson. Some endings aren't about punishment, they're about protection. When Scorpio walks away, it's not always because they hate you. Sometimes it's because they finally remembered how much they love themselves. Part 7. The line between forgiveness and wisdom. People always say, you have to forgive to heal. But Scorpio knows something deeper. Forgiveness is not the same as permission, and it is not owed to everyone. Scorpio doesn't carry bitterness, they carry memory. And in that memory are sacred boundaries, hard-won lessons, and quiet awakenings. Forgiveness to Scorpio is not a casual choice. It's a sacred act, one that must be earned, not expected. Because here's the truth, sometimes the most enlightened thing you can do is not forgive someone who knew they were hurting you, and did it anyway. Let's break this down. Forgiveness has two faces. The egoic forgiveness, where you say, it's okay, I'm over it, just to avoid conflict. And the spiritual forgiveness, where you say, I release this energy, but I will never allow it near me again. Scorpio lives in the second one. They don't forgive with words, they forgive through transformation, through the burning, the unraveling, the rebirth. But not everyone deserves access to who they become on the other side. And that's the line between forgiveness and wisdom. Wisdom says, I don't hate you, but I see you now, and I will not unsee you just to make you feel better. If Scorpio has cut you off if they've gone silent after the storm, they may have forgiven you in their soul. But that doesn't mean you have a seat in their future. Because true forgiveness doesn't always include reconnection. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's the final act of release. Scorpio doesn't hold grudges, they hold standards, and those standards are built from every betrayal they've survived. Life lesson, forgiveness is not weakness, but neither is protecting your peace. You can love someone and never let them close again. You can forgive someone and still walk away. Scorpio teaches us this. Sometimes the most powerful kind of healing is knowing who no longer deserves access to your energy, and honoring that without apology. Part 8. Conclusion. The final cut and the return to self. There's a moment in every Scorpio's life when they stop asking, why did they do this to me? And instead ask, why did I let them stay so long? That moment is liberation. Scorpio's silence isn't empty. It's full of everything they never said because they knew you wouldn't understand it anyway. Their distance isn't cruelty, it's protection from a world that too often mistakes emotional depth for weakness. When Scorpio cuts you off, it's not a game, it's not a manipulation tactic. It's a sacred boundary drawn in spiritual ink. And once that line is crossed, there is no going back. Because Scorpio doesn't just cut people off, they cut ties to false versions of themselves, versions that tolerated disrespect, versions that made excuses for other people's inconsistency, versions that begged to be seen when they already knew the truth. The signs they never forgive, they're not enemies, they're not evil. They're simply energetically incompatible with Scorpio's soul. Because when you live in the realm of shadow and truth, you can't build a life with people who wear masks made of charm, ego, or convenience. And so Scorpio walks away, quietly, decisively, completely. But here's the part no one sees. When Scorpio leaves someone, they're not just saying goodbye to a person, they're saying hello to their higher self. They rise, alone maybe, but whole. They love again, but never the same way. Because once you've looked betrayal in the face and survived, you become something else. Not bitter, not broken, but untouchable. And the real lesson, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone who couldn't hold your truth, don't apologize. Some souls aren't meant to stay. They were just cosmic mirrors meant to reflect back the parts of you that needed healing, protection, and power. So let them go, and in their absence, may you finally hear the voice of your own soul again. Final words to the audience. If this spoke to your Scorpio soul, if you've ever had to cut someone off and were made to feel guilty for it, know this: you didn't walk away because you stopped loving them. You walked away because you finally started loving yourself. Call to action. Do you agree with this? Have you ever forgiven someone in your spirit but never let them back into your life? Share your story in the comments. Your story might help another Scorpio feel less alone. And if this message found you at the right moment, subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom, where every Scorpio truth becomes sacred.